We tend to think of artificial intelligence as weightless software, a voice in our phone, a chatbot in a browser, something floating invisibly in the cloud. But bringing that virtual assistance to life requires tearing up the physical earth. To build the physical brains behind these systems, tech companies are pouring in capital at a scale that is difficult to comprehend, with infrastructure spending projected to eclipse $700 billion by 2026. This chart tracks projected capital expenditures over the next few years. As the data shows, building the AI supply chain is now pulling in more money than the entire planet spends on oil and gas production. That money is materializing in places like rural Louisiana, where Meta is constructing its Hyperion campus. Once finished, this single 4 million square foot site is projected to cost $200 billion and draw at least 5 gigawatts of power. That is enough electricity to run 4 million American homes. It will be the most expensive single piece of private infrastructure ever built in the United States, and it forces us to ask, why does a technology designed to be entirely digital demand the heaviest, most power-hungry construction boom in modern history? For decades, the geography of the internet was governed by a single rule: latency. To make websites load faster, traditional server farms had to be built close to major population centers. These standard servers were relatively low maintenance. A typical rack of computers steadily processed data, while safely drawing a manageable 10 to 14 kilowatts of electricity. But AI training doesn't work like a standard web search. It requires thousands of processors calculating trillions of parameters simultaneously, acting as a single, highly dense, synchronized brain. Looking at this comparison schematic, you see the mechanical limit. While old racks pulled 14 kilowatts, new AI systems draw up to 130 kilowatts. To cool that much heat with standard air conditioning requires hurricane-force winds, so the industry abandons air entirely. Instead, they pump liquid coolant directly over the chips, leveraging the fact that fluids are 3,000 times more efficient at absorbing heat. Because the physical hardware at the microscopic level became too hot and too dense, the traditional layout of the internet melted down. The machines had to adapt. And because AI models spend months doing all of this heavy calculation offline in a process called training, nobody is waiting on the other end for a web page to load. The latency requirement vanishes. A model learns just as fast in a remote Wyoming field as it does in Manhattan. Freed from the need to be near cities, companies immediately set out to find the one resource that matters now: raw electricity. But they collided instantly with an American power grid completely unprepared for gigawatt-scale demands. Procuring the electricity is only half the battle. Stepping up the voltage to transmission levels requires massive industrial components. Wait times for these generation step-up transformers have spiked from 2 years to 5 years, prompting the U.S. government to invoke the Defense Production Act. In most of the country, connecting new power generation to the grid triggers complex federal reviews that can take up to 8 years. To bypass this, tech companies are flooding into Texas, taking advantage of its electrically isolated and fast-moving ECOT grid. Yet even Texas isn't enough. Desperate for guaranteed 24/7 baseload electricity, giants like Google are directly purchasing small modular nuclear reactors just to keep their data centers running. Microsoft is paying $1.6 billion to literally restart dormant nuclear operations at 3 Mile Island, the exact site of America's worst commercial nuclear accident. What began as a race to write the most advanced software code has mutated into a ruthless, physical hunt for raw, unregulated electricity. Even after securing the power, managing the extreme heat generated by these chips creates a secondary crisis. Once the direct-to-chip liquid absorbs the heat, the building still has to dump that thermal energy out into the world, relying heavily on evaporative cooling. As this visual breakdown shows, the math behind evaporative cooling requires staggering amounts of water. A single large AI data center can drink up to 5 million gallons a day. That is the exact same water volume needed to supply a city of 50,000 people. Evaporative cooling happens to work best in dry, arid climates, so tech companies are aggressively buying up cheap land in desert metros like Phoenix, directly draining the exact regional aquifers and rivers that are already under severe drought limits. Local governments often welcome the initial arrival of these mega campuses, lured in by a massive surge in temporary construction work. But once the concrete dries and the servers turn on, the finished facility employs barely anyone. The true long-term cost is passed directly to the neighbors. Because these immense structures strain the local electrical grid, overall utility bills for residents living near data centers have spiked by as much as 30% since 2020. Communities are starting to fight back against these windowless boxes. The number of canceled data center projects quadrupled from 2024 to 2025. And Maine recently became the first state to outright ban large facilities completely. The more capable and intelligent our digital systems become, the more aggressively their physical infrastructure devours the land, water, and power of the communities forced to live next to them.